Hi, I'm Clark on Temptress. I designed a very efficient battery-powered air conditioning system. Last week we talked to a couple who's going to install the first prototype on their boat. We all got together and decided that this was good for their lifestyle, that they had enough space to mount it, and that they could make enough power to run it. And in this video, we're going to talk about that installation step by step. This video is for people either actually installing or just thinking about installing one of my systems. This will show you that it's something you can handle, but if you think it's over your head, you'll know from this video whether you want to hire someone to do it for you. We're going to work right along with the manual. You'll find a link to the manual down in the description if you want to follow along. There'll be timestamps and you can jump to whatever section you're interested in if you want to see that part again. So here's what we're doing in today's video. We will choose installation sites on the boat for all the components. We'll prepare the air handler for installation. We'll install the compressor and the condenser. We'll put the air handler where we want it. We're going to plumb it all together with the copper tubing, and I'm going to give you a little lesson on how to do a good flare fitting. We'll install the wiring to make it all get power, and then add some last touches to finish the install. Let's get started. David and Kendra have decided to put the air handler in the aft cabin where they sleep. This is fairly common. They put the air handler right over their bed, so the cold air will blow on them while they're sleeping. Also gives them the option to curtain off their bed if they ever want to save even more power and make the cooling space much smaller. They're going to put the thermostat right near the air handler and right near their bed, so it's easy to make adjustments. They're placing the compressor and the condenser under the bed. They have a good spot there. Their boat already had good through hulls for bringing in salt water and dumping the salt water back into the ocean. There's a great place for the water pump right near the intake through hull. They found a place for the boost converter very near their main power panel. Now that we have all the sites chosen, let's prep the air handler. Well, it's time to start the installation in earnest now. I'm actually having David and Kendra read me my manual, so I'm doing these in order. So if you would do this install, it'll be the same. The beginning of the manual says take the air handler, this is the air handler, and remove all the wires except for the ones going to the motor. All of these components are for air conditioning, but they're for a very inefficient automotive style of air conditioning. We're going to get rid of all that, and we're going to build it back the right way. So I'm going to take off this little resistor pack. And that leaves a big old hole. And there's this metal foil tape that I find works just wonderful for things like this. You just set it and forget it, and if you don't break it physically, it like never comes detached. And we'll just do that. And that's up underneath in this installation, almost every installation, so you'll never see that. And then just take these ground wires off. And that is all the unwiring. This is garbage. Now we've got these two wires. They go right to the fan blower. If we applied 12 volt to these, the fans would run. And what we're going to do is use a much more modern way of slowing them down. This is a speed controller, and it breaks the 12 volt into like a pulse. And if the pulses are wide, the motor is going to run fast. And if the pulses are narrow, it's going to run slower, but in a very efficient way, not that resistor-y way. Now, Kendra and David felt they would like to have this right here, and they're going to just double-side tape it down here. So I'm going to run the wires so we can do that. Maybe they'll put it here, because that's how long the wires already are. So after a little discussion, we've decided that here is the right place to put it in their installation. But you can mount this thing anywhere you want, just how long the wires are. Okay, so I grab these two wires, nip them off, strip them back, and You don't need this, but since I bought this fancy crimpy tool, I'm going to put ferrules on the end. It is good when you're putting on stranded wire into a screw connector to use these ferrules. And these ferrules, well, I bought them because of that BBMS thing I do, and I'm just dealing with a lot of this stuff. So, put that on there. Now, on the back of this, it says power and motor, and negative and positive. So, pretty obvious, but hook the motor to the motor pins and the black one to negative. This way around. And later on, they'll tape or hot glue or whatever it right into this position, and that'll work for them. That's it for now. Eventually, we're going to be bringing some 12 volt to here so that this thing works. But for now, that's the end of that part of the instruction. What's next? It says connect and install the air handler. There's plumbing to this, and I'm going to do some of the plumbing right here. These are the O-ring automotive type refrigerant fittings, and I'm taking these off now. Now, I've already taken these off because we were trial fitting and doing things being the demonstrator model. But when you get yours, these will come off with some effort. But you can do it with your hands. And then when you take this rubber stopper off, you'll see that there's a lot of pressure inside here. That's because they charged it with dry nitrogen so that everything is all nice and dry and perfect inside. And, well, we've already opened this one, so it's not filled with dry nitrogen anymore. That would vent a lot in your case. Now, put this on. This is a flare fitting, and flare fittings are really good, and they just work. But years ago, I discovered this stuff, and I've been using it on my flare faces. Honestly, I don't think it's necessary at all, but I haven't had a failure since I've done it. I haven't had a failure really before I did it. So I think it doesn't hurt, it might help, and it definitely keeps tigers away because I haven't had a tiger around since I've been using this stuff. When we get closer to install, we'll be running the copper tubing off of this fitting. You could really do any of this installation in any order. It's just kind of more convenient to do things that might require you hanging upside down when the thing's on a table. Okay, whenever you tighten something in copper brass, don't just tighten it because you're putting a lot of torque on all the bits underneath, and the bits underneath aren't as strong as you are. So you want to always have a bolster wrench below and work wrench against wrench. Now, that's all. Okay, I believe you said that we're at the point now where this gets physically installed in the boat, right? Here's the best part about being the consulting engineer. I gave David all the instructions where all the physical things had to go, and he's built shelves and mounted things and got all sweaty, and I was having a nice rum drink on my boat or something, I don't know. So he's done a lot of work. We're gonna look at his work now and let him finish this install. Here you go, David. David found this spot under their bed. It has good side and top access, which is really great, and it was good for filming too. First thing he did was put the condenser in. He mounted it a little higher than normal, but that's what the space required. You can see there were already some other pumps in here. Then he put the compressor inside the condenser. You don't have to mount it this way. You can mount them anywhere you really want to. But this saves space, makes everything fit together pretty nice. But sometimes you find that your boat requires the condenser to be mounted vertically. That's an option too. The kit comes with this hose. The hose is sized for mounting the condenser around the compressor. You don't have to use this hose. You can do this with copper fittings if you prefer. David's dry fitting the hose now just to see if everything fits. We'll do the proper install a bit later. Now let's continue with the air handler installation. This installation is done almost exclusively with flare fittings. It can be done with flares. In this application, I soldered one kind of little specialty elbow because we had interference. But you can do this whole install with just flare fittings. So I'm going to show you how to do a flare fitting. This is some 1/4-inch line, and this is some 1/4-inch refrigeration line. I'm going to first cut it off and have a nice clean end to work from. This is a tubing cutter. It's got a hardened metal wheel and a couple bearings. And you can put this in here. You just tighten it up gently and turn it. And when it feels real easy to turn, you tighten it up a little more. And that it's pressing that wheel into the copper, and it just cuts a little bit each time. They come in different sizes. This is the standard one, but sometimes you can't fit this around where you want. I like these little ones an awful, awful lot. All right, now, a nice clean cut now. Use something that you can put in and clean any burrs out, and tip it downward when you do this because you want the gravity to help the little pieces of copper fall out. You don't want little bits of copper inside your refrigeration system. Really don't. There's a filter in it though. It'd probably catch them. Okay, get that all nice and clean inside. Now, we're going to make a flare to this, and the flare just means we're going to spread the copper out to a very precise angle. Here's the most important part about a flare fitting. This is called the flare nut, and it'll be what clamps it together at the end. You put this on first. Trust me, you do a few of these and you'll forget, you'll get the flare on, and then you can't put this on anymore, and you have to cut it off and start over. Okay. Next thing you do is get your flare clamp, and you put that in for the size tubing you've got. That's the hole for 1/4-inch. And you make it just stand a tad bit proud in this direction and clamp it down. Then this is going to form the actual shape, the anvil of this and the hammer of that, I guess. And you put it into the end of the tubing, give it a little twist so it locks on, and then it's just as simple as tightening this down and then removing it. Then you remove your clamp, and you have made a flare. The last thing to do is move the nut over it to make sure it fits. Sometimes if you get really aggressive, you'll make the flare too large and the nut won't go back over it. So just check that. And what we have now is something that when this and its matching part come together, it pinches this little flare and it makes a very nice gas seal. So anyway, that's how we flare things. Now I'm going to pass this over to David because he's doing all the physical install. I'm doing the brain work and the light wet. You can see that I'm not sweaty today. But he is now going to do the next stage, which is installing physically the air handler in place. We've got that all electrically prepped, and now we're going to do the plumbing part, get that installed, and then we go to the next step.
All right, let's get the air handler mounted. We've got the 4 screws right into the appropriate strength headliner here. It's going to hold the weight of the unit without a problem.
Probably actually go like right back to the wall and then back this way because anything that sticks out is just asking.
But get this tail buried first.
Sure.
I don't think I could do it otherwise. Talk to me. Okay, stop there. Boy, is it hot. I sure wish we had some air conditioning. All right, I have finished the installation of the air handling unit. We've got the bracket mounted solid, and then the next thing we did before actually putting the 2 side screws in was to take the 3/8" copper line and bend it to the appropriate route to get back to where it connects to the air handler. So it's critical to get that joint proper so that we have a good mating surface with the copper. This is the location where you might be able to actually use an elbow rather than bending the copper, but we did what we had to do to make this one fit. And then after getting the air handler bolted in place with the 3/8" low pressure side connected, we went ahead and added in the 1/4" copper line and made our connection to the expansion valve on the high pressure side. And then lastly, to top everything off, just took a piece of 3/8" OD polyethylene tubing for the drains in the air handler. There's a drain on each side, but if you have it at an appropriate angle, you may only need to use one. And that is just going down to the bilge on the boat for the water to be pumped overboard, the little bit that might collect. The speed control unit that Clark wired up earlier is mounted on the back of the unit here, so it can still be reached, but is out of the way. We've got the wires running from that into the hanging locker here, which is where we'll make them connected to the relay and control the unit. All right, we've got our copper lines coming down from the air handler. Now we got to get them connected up. The first step though is to join the compressor to the condenser with this supplied piece of hose here. So we've got some nice top and side access here, and we're gonna pull the black plug out of the fitting here. And there's a 90-degree elbow and a 45 on this piece of hose. The way that this one is oriented seems to be appropriate, but since you can mount the compressor and condenser independent, your mileage may vary. And so after we remove that plug, we also need to take this little piece of copper plug off of the condenser itself To do that, the condenser is pre-charged. It's a good idea to take the cap off of the 1/4-inch fitting and depress the valve to let the pressure out so that you're not fighting that while trying to get these threads apart. So with 2 wrenches here, alright, so as long as our flare fitting surface is nice and clean, put a little bit of this sealant on there, make sure that we get it nice and good on both of the mating surfaces, and we'll get our hose in place. I'm going to start with the 90-degree fitting on the high pressure side of the condenser. Get that snug down, but so that I can still rotate the hose, and then bend the hose so that it will come and find its way up to the condensing side. We've got the hose connected. Now we need to get these lines trimmed to size and bent so that they make the proper turns to come over to our compressor.
Actually, decide where you're going to put the filter dryer and just cut it there. We'll flare it and put the filter dryer in.
Okay.
That'll be the easiest thing because then we have more flexibility. Okay, the filter dryer has an arrow on it. It's very important that it goes in the direction of the flow of the refrigerant. See the arrow there? It goes that way.
So our refrigerant on the high pressure side is headed towards the air handler.
You might not want to make that totally tight yet. You put the other one on, and then you can kind of use 2 wrenches on those against each other because you see what I mean.
Gotcha. We've got the filter dryer installed in the 1/4-inch line. We've taken the remaining 1/4-inch line and bent it into the appropriate shape to mate with the condenser here. Flared the ends with the nuts on, that's the most important part. And now we're ready to make the final connections to that. First I've got to remove the plug end off of the condenser 1/4-inch. So this is just acting as a plug on the condenser, but it has that valve built in, which is what allowed them to put the nitrogen pressurization for shipment. so we don't need that piece anymore. A good clean sealing surface. No gunk in the line. Not a little bit of this. And we'll do the same on the filter dryer. Okay, with the 1/4 inch line connected and the filter dryer in line, oriented properly, we are almost finished with our connections onto the 3/8 inch. Get this copper line cut and connected to the compressor. Alright, we've got our 3/8 inch copper tube aligned, and I'll drop it right down onto the fitting on the compressor and lock it up. All right, our copper lines are connected and the system is complete.
Yep, we need a little bit of saltwater plumbing still, and then wiring and gas, and it's done.
All right.
Wiring for this project is quite straightforward. You need to run some wires to the air handler and the water pump. You need to run some sensor wires to things like the thermostat. And you need to run your power wires from your main power breaker through the boost converter to the compressor board. All of that is described in the manual, and it's basically a fancy version of wiring up a light bulb. What are you doing, Kendra?
Well, I'm making a little box for our thermostat control so it doesn't look ugly hanging out.
That is just tremendous. You have to hold that.
I got it.
Beautiful.
Now that it's all physically installed, it's time to charge it with refrigerant. You could hire a pro to do this for you, but it's really something you could do yourself. And the next video, we're going to go into detail how to set that all up. If you are going to do this yourself, I suggest you take a look down below in the description to the Amazon store link we have. It has all kinds of stuff we found over the years to be helpful, and it has one section that has all the tools you need to do this project. Thanks for watching the video. Please subscribe, mark it as you like it. If you know anybody that needs an air conditioner on their boat, please pass this video series on to them. I'd like to get the word out. Now, these are going to become available real soon. The first batch, there's only 100 of them. There'll be more later, but if you want an early batch, if you want to have one in for this summer, we are giving them to patrons first. So joining us on Patreon can't hurt your odds. Stay tuned for the charging video, and then this project will be done.